demonic angel, I thought I would share a reincarnation story with you guys. Kind of as I put together the pieces, I think, of the puzzle for myself spiritually, you know, I just kind of come to an even higher level of self-awareness of how this kind of idea of reincarnation ties into my life. So one of the, I would say, kind of creepy, to be honest, but it's just breathtaking kind of deja vu aspects of all this is that my dad has told me so many stories of what his great-grandmother told him, because he spent so much time with her for really trashy, reasons. That he ended up spending a lot of time living with his great-grandma. So he had, as a child, when I was a child, he would tell me stories that she would tell him. So around Halloween time, my dad would tell me, yeah, my grandma, her, name, used to tell me that there's no ghosts. Every Halloween, my dad would sit me down and say, my great-grandma, and her name, would say there's no such thing as haunted houses because ghosts are out in the hills. And they're out there because there's iron in the hills. And so don't worry about ghosts being in your house. So what that is interesting, right? So all these years I've seen the wrought iron fences and looked at them and thought they're beautiful artistically, but of course they used to be very practical to keep animals out from eating the deceased, digging them up and eating them. To iron actually conducts electricity, so it's why cemeteries are haunted. So for the last 110 years I've been saying the same thing. By saying that the ghosts are out in the hills because there's iron, the dead are haunting the cemetery, because back then all cemeteries had wrought iron, and iron conducts electricity. So the dead can't leave the cemetery, just like the dead can't leave the hills that have iron, because they are electricity, so they are kept in the ground. They can't leave. So that was meant to protect the dead from the living and the living from the dead. So the dead are not restless and wandering. They are by being in the ground, it's essentially making the reincarnation process happen. So the ego is broken down when basically the person's soul or spirit stays in the ground. Then the dead are protected, kept in the ground, so they're not suffering, they're not wandering, and the living are not haunted. So it's also why the Irish hang horseshoes above homes, made of iron to ground energy, to protect. So when you do that, though, you also are keeping out good spirits, because they can't. It's why they would say ghosts can't cross water. They can't cross iron. And so humans in the Middle Ages, even in the 1800s, they instinctually knew. It's not consciously explained, right, that iron should go around cemeteries. It's the signals from the earth, speaking to humans, really, just us being still connected. And it serves a very literal purpose, to keep animals, scavengers out, and to keep the dead in, stay in the ground. So, as time has gone on, you guys, I have seen my dreams in a different way, okay? So, ever since, I was a kid, I would have dreams about being freaked out that I couldn't get out of something. So just, kind of the idea of like waking up in a coffin. But it wasn't quite so confining. But just flipping out. And so in my last life, it was very important to me that I kind of interpreted this as maybe an old Victorian kind of dream about waking up. Like the fear of waking up in a coffin and not being able to get out. Just maybe thinking that, like, hey, that would have been something I would have dreamed about in my last life, right? But just that conscious experience of being, laying like what you would think of as being in a coffin, and trying to, like, you wake up and you're just trying to get out. Okay. I think that was actually me understanding the importance of having a grave marker, grave slab, put over on top of me. It also settles the earth, because the earth is gonna, it's gonna settle in sinkholes. That's why you gotta be careful at really old cemeteries, because it's settling. So like everything's going back into the ground. It was so that I couldn't get out, and that process, again, just instinctually understanding that was another way to just keep the soul in the ground so it can be broken down and reincarnated in a faster kind of way. I think so I actually think that my other experience of sitting on a porch and remembering my life was me remembering my life, it not being connected to my senses so much because I was weak and old, but that was actually, while me not being a ghost, but being alive and old in my last life. But the only memories I have of being an actual ghost is being in the ground and not being able to get out. But what that actually did was hasten this process. So the ground can, even though it's going to take the ground of the earth many, many years to exactly break down every part of you, and the calcium especially, what it can do with consciousness can be very fast. And then additionally, things like copper, old copper mining towns. Copper amplifies energy. And so I think that I thought the last person that I was ever going to see was going to be who I would be with, that I just had this emotional belief. It was just solid belief. So I last saw my dad. He was the last person I ever saw when I was alive. And I just believed that I would be with him. And because of the conductive nature of copper, which was in the whole fucking town, so which amplifies things like thoughts, and just completely believing that, you know, having a grave slab, having the intuition to know that that would do that, I just naturally, my mind went to those phases of the earth and the cycles, like, yes, you know, life will begin again, and this is that moment of total belief. So I think that that makes it unique. That might have to do with why I remember my last life. You know, to come into terms of thinking about it like that, yeah. So things like wrought iron and cement slabs keep consciousness in the ground where it can be broken down faster. And part of that problem, of course, is that, like, you know, ghosts are electricity, so they're not grounded. So it just is absolutely amazing to me to they're out in the hills, because the iron keeps them there, to just that was, you know, my last life I'll ever have of just pure intuition, just not questioning it, knowing exactly what is going to be natural. So I just shared a lot of, like, you know, I'm honestly just trying to document it too, like I said. But yeah, I you know, it's really true. I think that we have to imagine that conductive metals do have an effect on amplifying consciousness, because, you know, our brains are electrical. And so, yeah, of course it does. It makes sense in that way. And I just intuitively understood it, and I subjectively remembered it, and the purpose is to broaden my empathy and understanding, and you know, definitely be a little bit of an old soul, because, like, you know, I definitely think that having that, it's like having two lives, is just a depth for sure. Yeah. So when I do visit cemeteries, I do like to sometimes I'll tell the dead to stay in the ground. I mean, they're weightlessness now, so that can kind of help them. Or we could create sound vibration with wind chimes that can make the energy around them more pure and protective. So just, you know, things like that. Yeah, it's a lot for sure.